Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the New York Jets franchise here on Madden 20. So we have got the off season in this episode. So pretty much we're going to go over the end of the season and then we're going to get into what we did in free agency and the draft and things like that. And basically the end of the season is going to play behind you and I'm just kind of going to ramble going into the off season, basically why we did the things we did. As you can see there, you're seeing the conference matchups. And then here I'm showing you the Pro Bowl. We ended up having Javonte Williams, Jamison Crowder, Kyle Pitts, CJ Mosley, Marcus May, and I think that's everyone. Basically make the Pro Bowl, and that was really cool to see. I was surprised that May and Pitts made it, that they did. And other than that, hopefully it's the first of many, and hopefully Trey Lance can make it. I think he would have made it had he played the entire season. But looking forward towards the offseason, as here you're going to see the Super Bowl teams and I think the Super Bowl champion. But looking at the offseason, here were my big needs. I basically wanted to add a cornerback, a wide receiver, and some type of edge rusher. And we also ended up having the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So basically, I was determined to get something with that pick, whether it would be an actual player or whether it was going to be just trading it for, just some assets. And, of course, one thought that came to my mind was potentially trying to trade for Deshaun Watson, but then I thought, considering that the Texans went 8-8, re-signed Will Fuller, and he missed half the season, it didn't make as much sense that he would have continued to want to leave the Texans, so I just decided to go in a different direction. Now, you're probably wondering why I wanted a wide receiver. Well, basically, I have been regretting the Juju Smith-Schuster signing for a little bit, and I wanted a more big-time wide receiver. As you're seeing there, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, led by Tom Brady, as Brady does end up retiring, end up beating the Colts in the Super Bowl. But basically, I wasn't really happy with Juju Smith-Schuster. I wanted another big-time kind of wide receiver number 1, but I couldn't find anybody to trade for. Kenny Golladay was probably the best candidate, as you're seeing on screen, given that his stats, like, he led the Lions in yardage last year. So nobody on that team had a good year, especially him. So I felt like it just made the most sense to maybe trade for him. But then I saw in free agency that Calvin Ridley was available. And it's funny because I was thinking that maybe we could have tried to trade for Julio Jones, but it seems that the Falcons chose Julio Jones over Calvin Ridley. I decided that, you know what, let's go ahead and make a run at Calvin Ridley. Now, before I continue any further, I do want to talk about the players that we re-signed and also cut. So we ended up re-signing Jamison Crowder and Falorantu Fatukasi. I was initially going to let Fatukasi walk, but after playing through the playoffs, I felt like there was no point to let him leave. I wanted to keep him. And then with Jamison Crowder, he had an awesome year, and he was going to be brought back for less money than we had Juju Smith-Schuster under contract for, which is kind of another reason why I wanted to trade Juju in the first place. Basically, as you saw, there was the offer for Calvin Ridley, $75 million over 5 years. I think it's a fairly unrealistic offer. I think he would sign for less years in real life, but regardless, that's the offer sheet we gave to him. And then, while Juju Smith-Schuster's value was at the highest, we shipped him off to the Washington football team because they needed another receiver, and that was the trade for a 3rd and a 5th next year. Now, looking towards our signings, so we ended up bringing in Jason Kelsey. I wanted another big piece on the offensive line. I felt like that was an absolutely perfect move, considering that our entire offensive line is young and up and coming, and we add Jason Kelsey, who's pretty much been one of the best centers in the league for the last few seasons, who basically watched his O-line fall apart in Philadelphia, and now he comes here to an offensive line that is youthful. Of course, we got Calvin Ridley, and then Romeo Okwara. He was quite an interesting player. You could argue that I overpaid for him, but I love Romeo Okwara both in real life and in Madden, so that's why I wanted to add him as a rotational piece. And then there was Dalton Schultz, the former Cowboys tight end, just a decent blocking tight end since we let go of Chris Herndon, and then Riley Cole for the linebacker depth. And then, other than that, in the next stages of free agency, I brought in a new kicker in Kai Fairburn, and then I brought on Leon Jacobs and Christian Kirksey as linebackers. Now, looking towards the draft, basically the consensus number 1 overall guy was Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon, the 6'6 defensive end, and that's exactly who I ended up taking. I felt like he was just the missing piece on what is already a stacked defensive line, so I thought it was awesome to get him. And then I found a cornerback that I really liked, but I thought he was going to get picked, so I end up making this trade with the Texans here, and it pretty much involved shipping out Connor McGovern, which is kind of a bummer, but again, we have such good young pieces on the offensive line, I'm not too worried about it. And then we ended up taking Ahmad Gardner here. A press, B zone, and a hidden development, just an absolute perfect fit, especially because if you remember early on in the video, I said I wanted to add a new cornerback. Basically, I wanted to bring in a number 1 corner. I felt that we couldn't really compete at the next level with Jason Verrett still being our top guy. So that was pretty much why we brought him in. And then looking at the rest of the draft, it wasn't really a crazy eventful draft like last season's at all. We just kind of took a ton of guys to really fill out the roster. As you can see here, just some backup tackles and guards, a couple depth pieces at linebacker, safety, and then just another corner that I thought looked half decent. Overall, the roster is really good, as you're going to see it scroll by on the screen. This is currently the roster going into the preseason, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't really that crazy of an offseason. We did get Calvin Ridley, which is awesome because even though he's going to be making more money than Juju Smith-Schuster was, he has a superstar development, which is key considering that we're using the progression tool and not just Madden's basic linear progression. So the more superstar players we can get, the better they'll develop, and we're really taking a chance on Calvin Ridley's development. And I think that even though his deal looks expensive now, considering that it's 5 years long, by the time he really develops and reaches his stride and hits his prime, it's going to look like a pretty team-friendly deal. And then with Romeo Okwara, he might actually end up getting the starting job over Bud Dupree, depending on how he does, but hopefully Bud Dupree can be half as good as he was last season. Regardless, I know this was a short episode with the offseason, but there just wasn't much that I wanted to do. Overall, we're pretty much just waiting on the development of the team, and I'm really excited to see how we do. Now, one thing that I did not show that you saw there in the draft picks was we did end up trading one of our 3rd overall picks for some picks next year from the Carolina Panthers. This was a pretty minor trade, but it's always nice to get another 2nd round pick, so just throwing that in here at the very end just because I forgot to mention it earlier. But regardless, thank you all for watching, and I don't know when the next episode's gonna come out or what it's gonna be. I'm debating between either playing week 1 against the Patriots or in playing after we run the progression tool in week 4. So you'll of course see that in the next episode. Regardless, thank you all for watching, and make sure you follow me on Twitter for updates and things like that. Other than that, I'll see y'all in the next one. Adios.